Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know, from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars, topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Michael Schroeder. And we have a great show today. We have an excellent show coming up for you guys today. I'm going to talk about LeBron James' return to the Lakers, talk about the Nets versus the Bucks, which is coming up on Sunday. I'm recording this on Saturday for you guys listening in. And I'm going to talk about who has the edge, which team I trust more, the anticipation for that matchup. We're going to go into all those details. We're also going to talk about the significance of the Phoenix Suns clinching their first playoff berth since 2010 and the fact that right now they're the number one seed in the Western Conference. And then at the end, I'm going to break down the scariest lower-seeded teams in the postseason that are going to, I think, maybe potentially cause issues. Not saying they will for sure, but I think that they potentially can cause some problems and make things difficult for the teams that they play. So to start off the show, we're going to talk about LeBron James' return. That's right, LeBron James, who missed over 20 games with a high ankle sprain, made his return last night against the Sacramento Kings. This is significant, right? LeBron James is, in my opinion, the best player in basketball. He's a guy who orchestrates everything for the team. He's the most valuable player in the Lakers. And this is a big pickup for them to get him back with at least. Still, they have double-digit games left in their schedule, right? Pulling up the Lakers' record right now, just to give you guys an idea of how many games they have left, the Lakers at the moment in time, they are 36-27, okay? 36-27, which is a pretty good record. Again, they're only half a game up right now they have 9 games left, 72-game regular season. They played 63 games at this moment in time to get LeBron James back. Well, now they have 9 games left in the rest of the season. And right now they're only half a game up on Dallas for the number 5 spot in the Western Conference, which is not great because if you're the Lakers, you'd rather see Denver in the first round than the Clippers because Denver's not at full strength because they're missing Will Barton, they're missing Monte Morris, they're missing Jamal Murray. Right now it's been the great play of Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon doing all his versatility skills and making big contributions there. And then obviously, in my opinion, the MVP of the league in Nikola Jokic. But I'd rather see them if I were the Lakers in the first round because they're not as good defensively and they're not as talented as like the Clippers, for example. But anyway, to talk about LeBron James' return, I'm going to speak about how he did in that return, talk about also what it means for the Lakers, my theory about the Lakers, and then how the Lakers are going to go, how are they going to do in the postseason. So to break it all down, let's get started on it. So to break it down for you guys, LeBron James had 16 points in 32 minutes of action in his return in a 110-106 loss to the Sacramento Kings. The Lakers have lost 2 straight games, which is now, like I said, put them only half a game up of Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks for the 5th spot in the Western Conference. And I was going through Twitter this morning, and I saw people saying how the Lakers are going to play the Clippers in the first round. I'll get to that later. But the point is, LeBron James didn't look bad actually in his return back. He looked a little bit rusty. He looked a step slow than he usually would. But he didn't look really out of place, which is good, right? I think that he didn't look, playing 32 minutes in your return back is pretty good. the fact is, his body is able to withstand all that punishment because of the fact of how he conditions his body and how he takes care of it. But also what people don't realize is his mind, his meditation aspect, how he keeps his mind strong. So yeah, he was passing the ball up a lot. He was rusty. I mean, going 3 of 5 from the free throw line, then 1 of 5 from 3-point range, including the potential game winner against Sacramento. And people are going to decipher this and say, oh, the Lakers are in trouble because LeBron only had 16 points in his debut back. Well, LeBron had 16 points, but he shot 6 of 12 from the floor, and he had 8 rebounds and 7 assists. I mean, I understand people probably are expecting more because he's averaging in the season, over 25 points a game at the moment, right? He's 25.2 points a game on 51% shooting from the floor and 36.5 from 3. And then 8 rebounds, 8 assists, and a steal. I get that. I get people are looking for LeBron James to come back and score like 38 points every single night. But you have to realize, again, he's only played 42 games this entire season. So only playing 42 games, there is a concern there, obviously. And I think at this stretch actually in his career, this is the most amount of games he's missed. But to break it more down for you guys, I mean, it wasn't like, again, he played a really poor game last night. He didn't play, obviously, exceptionally well. I mean, again, he's only shooting 70% from the line this year. And I get it, right? But he was plus 5 when he was on the court. He did have 5 turnovers, which I think is to be expected when you're, having the ball in your hands a lot and also being rusty. Again, I'm going to break down some of the concerns I saw from it as well, but I'm going to break down the positive sides for at least people who are Lakers fans, because I'm not hitting the full panic button, right? A lot of people are. I'm not doing that, right? Because I think with the Lakers, what he showed me at least is the fact that he gets guys involved. You saw Andre Drummond get a lot more easier baskets on lobs and dump-offs than he did previous to that, right? Because he's not going to be required to at least create his own shot. It's just going to be get deep position where LeBron can hit you, pick and rolls, be ready for lobs, and then just finish your dunks around the paint, right? He missed a dunk last night that he had to make, and he does that every game. But I think that LeBron's impact, you could tell, the offense looked a little smoother as they started to get more acclimated. I think the big thing with the Lakers is chemistry, right? And I think LeBron James looked pretty decent last night. Now, the concerns for me, obviously, is that he did have 5 turnovers, which is rust. 3-point shooting wasn't quite great. I think at times, he was a little passive. I think he was trying to feel things out. I think the fact they only scored 106 points is concerning. And I think the fact is they have to build the chemistry, right? The biggest concern is getting that chemistry on point for the playoffs, right? Anthony Davis did have 22 points last night. But again, he played much better last night. But again, Anthony Davis has looked a step slow since he came back as well. And Andre Drummond, I think, has not played to his potential yet in a Lakers uniform. Done great in terms of rebounding, but in terms of defense, it's been a lot of defensive lapses, and in terms of scoring, has not been that 15-point-a-game scorer that I kind of expected him to be. So, to break this down in further detail, what this means for the Lakers is a few things, okay? Just to break down a few points for you guys. They're the worst offense in the NBA without LeBron James in the lineup, so they clearly needed him back because he at least can orchestrate things better from a point guard position. He's LeBron James, so he's going to give you 25 points a night and 8 rebounds, 8 assists kind of deal, and he's going to bring good defense. But he's a guy, again, that is just is a basketball savant, right? He's the best player in the league for a reason because he understands the game. He understands where the guys need to be effective. And I think that's why you bring him back. Also, it puts them back in the championship picture. That's point 2. And this is a big if, though, with their chemistry's on point, right? But having LeBron James and Anthony Davis back in the lineup does put your team back in the championship picture, right? That's ideally where it goes, right? It puts you back in the championship picture, and that's the whole deal there because, again, you're putting yourself in position to be a successful team moving forward, right? That's kind of what has been happening for them. And the fact is, LeBron James does put them back in the championship picture because he's LeBron James. Him and Anthony Davis have proven to do that. My third point is that LeBron needs to get himself back into it. What I mean by that is he needs to get himself back into rhythm, back into basketball shape, because you can do a lot of sprints. You can do as much training as you want, but playing basketball is just very different, right? Because the game's different speed than how you would do a lot of sprints, different stops and starts. You have to move laterally a lot more during the game. There's a huge physicality component to it, right? It's just different, right? And it's the same thing in like a lot of other sports that require a lot of conditioning, right? if it's a team game, it's a physical game, like a lacrosse, like a football, soccer, tennis, right? These sports require a lot of different level of conditioning that you can't just train on your own without actually playing the sport. Basketball is one of the sports that's kind of like that, right? Not kind of like that, it is that, right? I mean, I certainly know that basketball, you only get in shape by kind of playing the sport. I mean, you can get in shape by any kind of training you do outside of it, but you got to play in order to kind of get your rhythm and get that level of conditioning back. So that's point number 3. Point number 4 is actually what this means for the Lakers is that there's easier opportunities now for Andre Drummond to get easier buckets. What I mean by that is because, look, Andre Drummond, I think, is an okay post player. I think he posts up more like an elite level post player in terms of like how much times he wants the ball. But I think the fact is, all he has to be able to do is run the court, pin his guy in the basket, LeBron will give it to him. Alley-oops off pick and rolls, LeBron will give it to him. Back screen lobs, LeBron will give it to him, right? Also, just if LeBron drives to the rim and dumps it off to Drummond, right? That's an easier bucket for him to get an opportunity to score. So I look at all of that, and I say, okay, Drummond gets an easier opportunity to score. Anthony Davis gets another guy that makes things easier for him as well, right? This all kind of plays into factor, right? LeBron makes things easier for everyone else if the chemistry is on point. Again, there is a big if with the chemistry component, right? Because I trust LeBron James because I've seen him do it plenty of times before. But like with Brooklyn, right, there has to be that chemistry component in order for this team to be able to get the next level. But there are easier shots for the players around him, especially guys like Andre Drummond, Anthony Davis, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Ben McLemore, Taylor Horton-Tucker, these guys, right? So it's going to be an easier opportunity for those guys to get open shots. Next point is that you get on-court accountability and leadership. Now, people are probably sitting there and saying, what do you mean by that? Okay, well, everyone that follows us, at least that I hope, knows what accountability and leadership is and how important that is to sports. But again, accountability is just basically holding guys to a standard, and leadership in basketball is basically just making sure the guys follow you to successful avenues, right? So LeBron James does that on the court as well or better than anyone else in the league. And the reason why is because he understands the game well. He's been in many playoff experiences and playoff championship level games, and so he understands what it takes to get to that level, right? So when you have that guy as an on-court leader, it gets the team rallied around where they can at least get the opportunity to follow a good leader, be held accountable when they don't do the right things, and at least be held to a championship level standard. And that's really important as this team progresses into the postseason. Again, another point I'm going to make too is that they get the best player in the NBA back, right? Now, you can argue, there's people who think Durant is the best player in the league. I'm going to say LeBron because he proved it last year. He was the Finals MVP. I think he's overall just been a better player than Durant in his career, and he's a better player. You get the best player in the NBA back who's won an NBA championship last year, who's won multiple NBA championships, been in the postseason, and knows how to get to the finals at least and get his team rallied around. And having that guy back is just, again, that's what made the Lakers so special last year, and that's what I think is going to help them be special again if they get their chemistry on point. And then the last point, basically, with what this means to the Lakers is even if they get a lower seed, if LeBron and Anthony Davis are clicking correctly and they're playing their best basketball, that's a scary matchup for any team in the first round because you don't want to see the Lakers in the first round if they're clicking in all cylinders because LeBron and Anthony Davis have both proven to be good playoff performers, or if not great playoff performers, proven to be champions, proven to be guys who can overcome adversity. And at least Anthony Davis did that last year with the Lakers, and LeBron's done that throughout much of his career, especially after losing 2011 to Dallas. He overcame that adversity and won an NBA championship against the Thunder the next year, right? So as a lower seed, there's not as much of a panic mode if the Lakers' chemistry is on point. Everyone was, going crazy when in the bubble they didn't look very good. They went, I think, 3-5 in those 8-game stretch. And then they came out and beat the Portland Trailblazers in 5 games, and everyone thought that, a lot of people thought they were going to lose that series or it would go to 7 games, right? Then they played the Houston Rockets, right? People thought the small ball was going to be too much. Beat the Rockets in 5. Then they played the Nuggets, beat the Nuggets in 5. And then they played the Miami Heat and beat them in 6, right? So if you get LeBron James healthy and get his rhythm back and get the chemistry correct, this team with LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Andre Drummond, Dennis Schroeder, Taylor Horton-Tucker, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, this team can still win a championship, right? They're still good enough, still talented enough to win a championship. They still have Montrezl Harrell coming off the bench, giving you good minutes. So this is the thing, right? Even as a lower seed, they still got a chance to make a big imprint in the game. Now, here's a theory about the Lakers that I want to get into a little bit. Is that people think they're going to get the 6th seed and play the Clippers, which would be interesting from a few angles, right? I'm going to be pretty brief on this because I want to break down what I think the Lakers are going to do in the playoffs before I run out of time on this segment. But my theory about the Lakers is that if they play the Clippers, for example, I think that would be a really entertaining series. And I would actually probably pick the Lakers to win that in 7 if I see everything positive in terms of chemistry from the Lakers in these next 9 games. And the reason why is because I trust LeBron James and Anthony Davis more than I do Kawhi and Paul George. And I'm not going to be the guy who's going to slam Paul George. He's had a really bounce-back year. He's looked like a big-time playoff performer in the making. And he has had moments where he has performed big-time in the playoffs, right? But he's had a lot of other moments when he hasn't. Even when he had his near MVP season, he didn't perform well in the postseason. So again, I think that if that was a first-round series, that would not be as good for the Lakers as opposed to playing Denver. But that series would be very interesting, I think very entertaining. That's a theory that people are coming out with, and I just wanted to talk about a little bit, is that would be a really interesting first-round series. I mean, again, you would have Paul George and Kawhi versus LeBron and Anthony Davis. If Anthony Davis is on top of his game, though, and even Andre Drummond, that's a tough matchup for the Clippers because the Clippers don't really have a matchup for Anthony Davis. You could put Marcus Morris or Nicholas Batum on him, but that's not really the matchup I think they want. Look, the Clippers are going to take that matchup anyway, but I'm saying like that's a matchup that's very favorable for the Lakers. Kawhi and Paul George at least can switch and guard LeBron James and at least make things difficult for him. But Zubats and Serge Ibaka are guys who at least can make things difficult for a guy like Drummond. I'm not saying Drummond's an elite level scorer, but again, you let Drummond get a lot of rebounds, you let him get easy post touches, he can at least score 15 to 20 points, no problem. He's been an all-star a few years. And then Anthony Davis is just the X factor there, right? That's the whole deal there with that series. If Anthony Davis plays to his potential and shows me some high level of play leading into the postseason, it might be a really difficult series for the Clippers to win if Anthony Davis is not, looking sluggish, if he's looking like the real Anthony Davis that we saw last season in the postseason. But where are the Lakers going to go in the playoffs, right? I think this is an important question. Where are they going to go? In a sense, like, how are they going to do, right? Are they going to figure it out and get the 6th seed and lose to the Clippers in the first round and be a disappointment? Well, again, if people call this season a bust for the Lakers, that's fair, right? Because they have all the guys ready for the postseason. But they've been riddled by injuries in a sense too, right? It's like the Boston Celtics have been riddled by injuries. Miami Heat have been riddled by injuries, which I'm going to talk about the Miami Heat later on my show. But the point is that the Lakers are going to be held to a higher standard because they won the NBA championship and because LeBron James is heavily scrutinized. It's just how it is, right? So how they're going to do in the playoffs is going to be based on like their perception. Their perception is if they're clicking all cylinders, this team should win the world championship and come out of the West, right? That's what everyone thinks. Is even what I think too. So think about it, guys. When you're heavily scrutinized, right, there's a different level of kind of scrutiny that's going to be able to come to you as a team as opposed to maybe other teams in the Western Conference, right? People don't expect as much from Utah or Phoenix than they do from the Lakers and the Clippers, right? Even Denver, because they're like, oh, they lost Jamal Murray. They don't need those guys anymore. Okay, fine. That's fair. All right, I get it, right? But the point I'm making to you guys is like, where do I think see the Lakers going? Okay. I either see them it depends on matchups, right? It also depends on how they play in this last 9 games. If their chemistry looks really bad, if Anthony Davis looks sluggish, and even if LeBron's playing well, if they play the Clippers in the first round, if Anthony Davis is not on his game, Clippers are going to win that series. They will. They will win that series. But if the Lakers play the Nuggets, I definitely would take the Lakers in that series. Definitely would. I would take the Mavericks over the Nuggets at this moment in time. It's not a disrespect to Nikola Jokic and Michael Porter Jr. It's because I don't trust the Nuggets enough defensively, and I think they need a third scorer. I think Aaron Gordon is a good player, solid player, but I think Aaron Gordon, unfortunately, has not scored to the level I expected him to do, and he's been more of a really good 10 to 15 point kind of role player, great defender type of player. And Aaron Gordon's is a very solid player. I'm just saying that The Lakers, for example, I think are going to figure it out and get the 5th seed. I think that Dallas will get the 6th seed, and I think the Lakers will beat Denver in the first round and move on. But again, if they get the 6th seed, there's definitely a chance that they could be a first-round exit. I see the Lakers from 2 scenarios, right? I see them either being a first-round exit because they don't get their chemistry right and guys aren't fully integrated back and fully feeling comfortable in the system, or I see them getting to the NBA Finals. And that seems drastic. People are saying, really? You don't see them even getting to the Western Conference semifinals and losing, or Western Conference Finals? No, because I think that if they win the first round, I think their matchups are more favorable. In the sense, like if they beat the Clippers in the first round, let's say, for example, right? They play Utah, who I think Utah is definitely, I don't think they're better than the Clippers. I don't. I think the Utah has slipped a lot. Again, you have to get Donovan Mitchell back and see how he plays, right? And then you have to play Phoenix. And I think Phoenix has been really good this year. I think Phoenix has a chance to get to the Western Conference Finals because they look like a legitimate team because of what Chris Paul and Monty Williams have been able to bring to this young group together. But the Lakers could get to the finals if they beat the Clippers, for example, in the first round. Now let's do the hypothetical if they play the Nuggets in the first round, right? If they play the Nuggets in the first round, they would beat the Nuggets, then beat the Suns, and then they play the Clippers in the Western Conference Finals, and I think they would beat the Clippers in the Western Conference Finals, right? Because I think they would get, when the thing is, when the Lakers and LeBron teams gets on a roll, they don't usually lose in those type of big moments, especially in the later stages of LeBron's career. So that's kind of the way I look at it. So again, LeBron's return is very impactful. The Lakers still need to work on their chemistry issues. And again, they really should avoid trying to be in that 6th spot. I'm not saying they can't beat the Clippers, and I still think they could, but it'd just be a more favorable matchup to play against a more depleted Nuggets team than the Clippers at this point in time, who have a really high-level offense, and Paul George is playing at a much higher level. So that's how I feel about it. We're going to take a quick commercial break here, but when I come back, we're going to talk about the Nets and the Bucks, which team I trust more, how the game on Sunday I think will go, and if they meet in the playoffs, what that potential matchup will look like. All that coming back up after this break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Michael Schroeder. Thank you again for tuning into the show today. If you missed my last segment, which I really encourage you guys to go check out, I talked about LeBron James' return to the Los Angeles Lakers, what it means for them, talked about some theories with the Los Angeles Lakers seeding in the postseason, and then I talked about how far I think the Lakers ideally, or what I expect either from the Lakers this year in the postseason. Later on my show, I'm talking about why the Phoenix Suns clinching a playoff berth is so important and how them right now being the number 1 seed has been awesome to see. And then also, I'm going to talk about the biggest sleepers that are going to be lower seeds in the playoffs and what their room for disrupting the top seeds can be in the postseason. But this segment is going to be an exciting segment because we're going to talk about 2 of the top teams in basketball and 2 of the top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference that are playing on 3:30 on Sunday for a chance to kind of get a glimpse of what a playoff series between these teams will look like. And that is the Brooklyn Nets and the Milwaukee Bucks, which will be fun to see how those two play. But to break it down, right? So, like I said before, Nets play Bucks tomorrow at 3:30. The Nets clinched a playoff berth against the Raptors this past week. The Bucks are third in the East and have won 3 out of their last 5 games. They beat the Sixers twice in that span. The Nets are still without James Harden, who had a setback with a hamstring issue in his development. So again, he's going to be out probably until the postseason. The Bucks and Nets are both playing excellent basketball recently. And it's because KD and Kyrie have been playing real consistent. Again, Kevin Durant had 42 points and 22 points in the third quarter in a win at Indiana recently. And Kyrie's been having probably, in my opinion, the best season of his career. And I know people probably don't, like the fact that they load manage or take off for personal reasons or whatever. But the Nets have been a very good team. I spoke about the Nets plenty. I have concerns about their chemistry. I have concerns about their lack of defense. And I have concerns about James Harden not being a big-time playoff performer in the playoffs in the past years. But the Bucks still have concerns of their own, too. But what's going to be great about this is that the fact is that Giannis has been dominating. And I know Giannis got injured in their last game, so it'll be interesting. If Giannis plays tomorrow, we'll get a real glimpse to see how this thing will look. We got a little glimpse because of it earlier, but again, he has right now a right ankle sprain, and he's ruled out against the Chicago Bulls tonight, but we'll see if he plays against Brooklyn on Sunday. Look, whether or not he does, the reason why this game's going to be interesting is to kind of see what Milwaukee does in terms of offense if they have Giannis, right? Because what has been the key to beating the Bucks the last couple of years? For basketball fans out there who've probably watched the playoffs, it's to wall off Giannis. What that means basically is to put 3 or 4 guys in front of him, stack the paint, make him shoot jump shots or kick out the 3-point shooters. And the Bucks never really changed their offense or made any sort of adjustments to deal with that. Now, this year, what they've done a little bit is put Giannis more in the mid-post, low-post area. They've used more off-ball movement to get Giannis as a roller and pick and rolls and allow Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday to create more from the perimeter. And speaking of Drew Holiday, he's been a great pickup for the Milwaukee Bucks. He's provided major value because he's one of the best or even the best perimeter defender in the NBA. Like, if you've seen a lot of podcasts people have done with top NBA players, they consider Drew Holiday to be the best perimeter defender in the league. So you get that component, right? A guy who can guard a Kyrie or a Harden, and then you get Giannis who can guard Kevin Durant if need be. No one can really guard Kevin Durant, but Giannis at least has the length and athleticism to at least be able to try and make things difficult. Kevin Durant is the biggest matchup issue on Brooklyn because there's no real matchup for him. You can have guys who can match up with Kyrie and James Harden. It's just, again, those guys are so gifted offensively, they're probably going to still score anyway. But it's going to be interesting because Giannis just got hurt, like I said, right? And Brooklyn just got blown out yesterday by Portland. Grant, they didn't have Kevin Durant, but Damian Lillard just torched the Brooklyn Nets. And again, we're going to break it down in a sense, not just about the game tomorrow. I understand the game's happening tomorrow, but I'm talking about more in the sense of if these teams play in a playoff series, what would happen? Ideally, I think the Eastern Conference is going to be between the Brooklyn Nets and the Philadelphia 76ers in the Eastern Conference Finals, and I really don't know who's going to win that series. If it was Milwaukee and Brooklyn, I would take Brooklyn in that series. 100% would take Brooklyn in that series. And we're going to break it down why. We're going to say, okay, I look at this and say, why is Milwaukee not a team with all their talent that could beat a team like Brooklyn? Okay, that's an interesting I'm going to get into that conversation for you guys right now. So when I talk about this segment, I'm talking about who I trust more, right? So I have my concerns with the Brooklyn Nets, right? And I have my concerns with the Milwaukee Bucks. My concerns with the Nets, and if you guys have heard my previous podcast shows for GSMC basketball podcast about the Brooklyn Nets concerns, what I talked about were a few things, right? I talked about the guys being in and out of the lineup, the top 3 stars. They only played 7 games together, right? So the problem with that is that there's a chemistry not being built between those 3 stars. You know, KD and Kyrie, and KD and Harden and Kyrie have all played with at least 2 stars. And again, they've built that chemistry, but playing with all 3 it's just different, right? It's different because when you have all 3 on the same court, at the same time, there's one ball, and I understand James Harden's playing that point guard role, but you got to make sure he's healthy, ready to go. And that was a concern of mine. Another concern is that Brooklyn is still 25th in defensive efficiency. They have no real interior defender that can stop anyone from penetrating to the rim. Again, if you look at last night's game against Portland, right? Portland just kind of did whatever they wanted to do. And their thing, right? And they won 128-109 last night, right? And after having a subpar first quarter with 23 points, they scored 36 in the second quarter, 35 in the third quarter, and 34 in the fourth quarter. Right? Like that's not good, right? Norman Powell had 19 points. Yusuf Nurkic in 26 minutes had 23 and 11. He started to play a lot better recently. And then Damian Lillard had 32. CJ McCollum only had 10. And then you had Anthony Simons who had 10 points. Carmelo Anthony had 15. Let's count how many double-figure guys that is, right? This is why I have concerns about them, right? You got 6 guys in double figures from Portland last night. 6 guys, right? And then Brooklyn, another concern I have about them too is just the fact of kind of their care for the regular season, and that translates into the postseason, right? We saw the Clippers not have any sort of care about the regular season, and it turned into the postseason where it didn't necessarily work out in their favor, right? So I look at that, and that's a concern there. Milwaukee, it's the fact that they don't defend the three-point line well at all. It's the fact that Giannis has been stopped in the postseason by teams building a wall against him. It's the fact that Chris Middleton has been very inconsistent. And the fact that, like, those are kind of like the 3 concerns I have for them, right? And they've been inconsistent all year, right? They have decent role players. Bobby Portis has been doing a good job for them this year. But overall, there are major concerns with this team. 100% major concerns. And that's why those are the concerns I have with them. So in terms of who I trust more, I trust Brooklyn more, right? I trust Brooklyn more to win a series between these two teams because their stars are more proven. They have more talent. Their offense is more efficient, slightly, right? It's first to sixth, but they have a better offense. The fact is, too, is that they're harder to guard and harder to plan for because they have 3 stars who can go off at any time. They have role players who have really accepted their role. Blake Griffin, Joe Harris, Jeff Green, Bruce Brown, Landry Shamet. Again, Mike James now has been really a good piece for them since they acquired him recently. So what's interesting about all of this, what's interesting about how this is progressing, is the reason why I think Brooklyn is because they have more talent and they've been way more consistent this year, right? They haven't had as many lapses in terms of wins and losses. They haven't had as many guys play inconsistently, right? I think that they just are a team I trust more at this moment in time. Milwaukee's bigger, Milwaukee's better defensively, but Milwaukee doesn't defend the 3, and Brooklyn's big thing is they shoot the 3 exceptionally well. Joe Harris is one of the best shooters in the league. Kevin Durant's one of the best shooters in the league. Kyrie Irving's a very good mid-range and three-point shooter if need be. James Harden obviously can shoot the 3 really well. Landry Shamet can shoot it. Blake Griffin can shoot it. Again, that's a problem, right? And Brooklyn is the number 1 seed right now, and they haven't had their big 3 for more than 7 games, which shows you their role players know how to win, right, with 1 star. So the role players have accepted their role. And they're a tough matchup because I don't think Milwaukee is athletic enough or quick enough to at least contain Brooklyn's offense. I think it's because the problem is Brooklyn has those 3 stars that are just really difficult to game plan for. I have my concerns about them, but I think Philadelphia, for example, matches up better with them because Philadelphia has Seth Curry who can put on like a Joe Harris, and then you can put Tobias on one of the guys. You can put Ben Simmons on another, right? You put Ben Simmons on like Kevin Durant, for example, right? And then you can put Tobias Harris on Joe Harris or a forward or whatever, but they have a team to match up better, right? I think in terms of Drew Holiday can guard one of those guards. Chris Middleton, I'm not sure he can guard James Harden. And then Giannis can maybe make things difficult for Kevin Durant, but Giannis is more used to covering 4s. But again, that's just kind of the whole deal there, right? Is that Brooklyn has a lot of matchup issues that, even though I think they have concerns in terms of how they play, it's going to be a difficult kind of situation for Milwaukee if that ever happened. And the fact is, Brooklyn has had the number one seed for the fact of their role players have understood how to play with star talent. Steve Nash and Mike D'Antoni have run a very efficient offense, and they have won a lot of games against a lot of quality teams. So I get it, right? I get why people are very high on Brooklyn. I get the whole idea, right? You look at Philadelphia, right? They're half a game behind Brooklyn. I think Philadelphia right now, in my opinion, is a better matchup, right? That's just my opinion. I think Milwaukee has a lot of talent, but again, Milwaukee just lost the other night. So they won the other night, but they have had lost a bunch of games recently. And my apologies. Last night was the game they played against the Bulls. That's my apologies. They play the Nets tomorrow, but yeah, again, they've lost. They lost to the Rockets, right? Which is a game you should never lose, because Houston's won 16 games all year, or 15 games all year. And then you look at the Bulls, that's a game you have to win because the Bulls are right now not in postseason contention. But Milwaukee's just been inconsistent, right? More inconsistent. Their defense on the three-point line has not been very good. And so that is a problem in its own right there. That's why I think it just would be a very difficult matchup for the Bucks if they played against Brooklyn, just based on that factor. And the thing is, too, is that I look at the role players or the others in terms of Milwaukee, right? They don't really have, Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton are star talents. Brook Lopez was a star-level player. And you look at, I think, Brook Lopez needs to be used more, right? If they play against Brooklyn, you have to use Brook Lopez more. But I don't think Milwaukee will do that. That's the problem, right? Based on what they've done in the past, I haven't really seen that. And the problem is that's why I trust Brooklyn more, is because I think Brooklyn knows what it is offensively and knows how to adjust more properly to changes in the game. And I think Philadelphia knows how to do that pretty well, because I think if Embiid gets doubled, the guys know how to play off of that. But if you're just going to have Giannis at the top of the key just going 1-on-5, you're not going to win. And I know Milwaukee's made changes, but again, Giannis has been in and out of the lineup more this year than he has in past years. And Chris Middleton's a guy that can be really hot and cold. Drew Holiday's a guy who can also be the same way, even though I really like Drew Holiday. And again, they don't use Brook Lopez that much as a post player. They use him much more as a three-point shooter. And I know Brook Lopez can really shoot the three, but Brook Lopez averaged 20 points for his career in Brooklyn, basically just being an elite-level post player, right? And he was really good at that. He was a guy that was an all-star based on that kind of idea, the fact that you could throw the ball to him in the post and he could just go get a bucket for you. Right? I'm not saying you steer away from him shooting threes, but I'm saying if Brooklyn's going to go small, you got to make them pay for that, right? You got to put Giannis in the low post, and you got to put Brook Lopez in the low post. And I don't think Milwaukee's a consistent enough team in terms of adjustment changes for me to feel confident in that. That's my point. And that's kind of the argument I'm making here with this team. Also, you look at the fact that consistency, right, is a big theme here, right? Consistency, Brooklyn's been more consistent winning, more consistent offense, more consistent in beating the better teams. And that's a big factor for me. Big factor for me. And I think the thing, too, what people don't realize is that Brooklyn's small ball is a matchup issue, too. And the reason why it is because if you're a bigger player, guarding a smaller player is not always easy, right? You look at Yusuf Nurkic, like I talked about last week in the segment I did on the Portland Trailblazers. It's hard for him and a guy like Enes Kanter to guard guys in switches because those guys are quicker. Brooklyn having a lot more three-point shooters, you're taking the bigs away from the basket, and especially Giannis and Brook Lopez are good shot blockers, and because, the last couple of years, Brook Lopez has been one of the top shot block guys in the league. And taking him away from the basket to go guard like a Blake Griffin or a Jeff Green is difficult, right? It's very difficult. And that's kind of when I look at that. And that's the reason why Brooklyn is a team I trust more too, is because their matchups just work better. I think like the bigs on Philadelphia are a little bit more mobile, right? Giannis is the 4. I'm talking about the 5s. Like Bobby Portis is mobile, right? But I think Dwight Howard's more athletic and more mobile. I think Joel Embiid's more mobile and athletic than a guy like Brook Lopez. And that's why I think they have a better matchup matchup position with Brooklyn, because Philadelphia has more athleticism at their big spot than I think Milwaukee does. Milwaukee's got Giannis at the 4, but again, I'm talking about like a guy like Bobby Portis and a guy like Brook Lopez versus Dwight Howard and Joel Embiid, right? The athleticism clearly goes to the Philadelphia 76ers, and the defense goes to the Philadelphia 76ers as well. So that's why I kind of take that whole argument there too. And look, you guys could disagree with me on that, but that is a problem there. I think also you look at guys like Dante DiVincenzo, Pat Connaughton, right? They've had their moments, but they haven't been consistent, and they haven't been consistent in the postseason, hitting threes when they have to and everything like that. And they need to hit threes for this team to be able to get by the better teams in the Eastern Conference, right? I'm going to talk about sleepers later, but I think Milwaukee could even have a chance of losing in the first round, because if they don't change their playing style and the guys don't hit threes, not outside of maybe a guy like the Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton types, I'm talking about like the role players, right? A Dante DiVincenzo, a Pat Connaughton, right? Like these guys are just guys that have to be able to hit the three for this team to be successful, right? Bobby Portis. These guys have to hit their shots, because Brooklyn's going to score points some nights and you're just not going to be able to compete, but you got to be able to play defense in the three-point line, which Milwaukee struggles with, and you got to be able to hit your shots, which Milwaukee at times in the postseason has struggled with, right? Not at times. The last couple of years they've really struggled with that. So that's where I go there. But I think if the question is, look, I would take the Nets in a series over the Bucks, but the other question arises is, can the Bucks legitimately beat Brooklyn in a 7-game series? Well, yeah, definitely they could beat Brooklyn if they do what I just said they have to do in order to win. They got to move Giannis around more, run a more motion continuity type of offense where they're using Giannis as a roller and screen and rolls, where they're putting Giannis in the post more, where they're allowing Brook Lopez to go in the post more too, and not just being strictly a three-point shooter if Brooklyn decides to go small, which Brooklyn likes to do. And also, the reason why Giannis is effective in the mid-post is because you have him closer to the basket, where he only has to take 1 or 2 dribbles to get to the basket. I've talked about this before with just like why Joel Embiid's emerged so well, because you don't have to use as many dribbles in the post. I know the post up is not as efficient as a shot as it used to be. That's also A, because guys are not as good in the post, and B, because a lot of guys don't post up right underneath the basket, right? LeBron James, for example, very efficient post player. Joel Embiid, very efficient post player. So it works. And then again, Philadelphia is one of the top teams in the NBA right now. So it does work. And I'm saying you put Giannis down there in the mid-post where all he has to do is face up and take 1 dribble or 2 dribbles to get to the basket. Harder to build that wall against him. And then also the guys learn to cut and move without that. So it's the same thing like with a lot of off-ball movement. It puts the Bucks in a better spot to win. And that's important for them as they continue to move forward as well, because they got to be able to develop that off-ball movement, right? But ideally, the Bucks do have a scary good potential, because if they have that continuity on offense and they show that consistently, the off-ball movement, the posting up, right? Not having Giannis just stand on the top of the key, they could give Brooklyn a legitimate series, because their size can present a real problem for Brooklyn, right? And we've seen Giannis can dominate Brooklyn no problem in terms of scoring, because Brooklyn doesn't really have an answer for him inside. But the point I'm going to make, though, is that I would take Brooklyn just because they're more consistent. I trust their stars more, and Milwaukee's lack of consistency from its role players and their lack of consistency from guarding the three-point line is why I would definitely take Brooklyn, and why I trust Brooklyn more as a team, even though I do have my concerns about the Brooklyn Nets and how they're going to do in the postseason if they match up against a team like the Philadelphia 76ers or a top seed out west. But all that will remain to be seen. Sunday's game should be very fun and entertaining, and it'll be fun to see how it all unfolds. We're going to take a quick commercial break here, but when I come back, we're going to talk about the Phoenix Suns, the significance of them clinching their first playoff berth since 2010, and why them having the number 1 seed could be really crucially important. Also, we're going to talk about the sleepers that are lower seeds right now in the Western Conference and Eastern Conference later on the show. See you guys in a few after this break.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching.
Hey!
The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Michael Schroeder. If you guys missed my last segment, I talked about the Brooklyn Nets versus the Milwaukee Bucks. Talked about what team I trust more, how a series between them would go down, and what both teams would need to do in order to win that series. So those are good, really good teams, obviously, but I think that segment is something you guys should worth listening to. It's definitely worth your time. You guys should take a listen to it. Now, this segment, before I get into that, I'm also going to break down later potential teams in the Western and Eastern Conference that can be sleeper teams based on the fact they're lower seeded and they could cause some trouble. But before I get into that, we're going to talk about the Phoenix Suns, because the Phoenix Suns have been the biggest surprise, and I think the most pleasant surprise of success in the NBA this year. And again, guys, right, success comes from different ways, right? It comes from maybe the players you have. It comes from the culture. It comes from your coach. It comes from the front office doing a really good job, right? Success comes in different forms, right? Success is defined differently by everyone because people have different forms of success in their lives. But for the Phoenix Suns, they have really achieved success in the regular season so far. And I think they are a far more dangerous team, in my opinion, than Utah. Utah has looked a little bit more down to earth. You got to see how Donovan Mitchell comes back health-wise. I think Utah is still very good, but again, I look at Phoenix. I think Phoenix is going to get the number one seed. As of right now, they do have the number one seed. But the reason why it's really interesting about the Phoenix Suns is because they clinched their first playoff berth since 2010. I'm going to repeat that again for you guys. They clinched their first playoff berth since 2010. 2010. It's been a while. It's been 11 years since they made the playoffs. And people forget, in that time, they have been a really poor team in terms of winning and being successful. They've been in the lottery a lot of years. And that's with Devin Booker there too. So this is a big, big moment for this team. Now look, the thing is, you have young stars who have never been in the playoffs in Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton. Well, DeAndre Ayton might not be a star, but he's definitely like a borderline star. He has the talent, he's just not consistent enough. Devin Booker obviously is an all-star. He's a really good player. I think he's a top 4 or 5 under 25 player in the NBA right now. You can put in the conversation with guys like Luka, Zion. I would honestly take Devin maybe over Zion because Devin can score in different ways. You know, Zion's the most efficient guy probably in the list. Devin Booker is a big-time player. It would be tough. I think he's in my top 3 or top 4. You put him with Zion, Luka. You put him with Donovan Mitchell. You put him with that group. And then you have Jason Tatum maybe on the outside looking in. But anyways, getting off that, Chris Paul is back in a familiar spot again. Every team he goes to instantly becomes better. I've talked about the Suns in depth about this before. Every team that Chris Paul goes to has become better. The Clippers, before he got there, We're not a playoff team. Gets there, contender for the NBA championship. They never achieved those expectations, but they were a contender every year. He goes to Oklahoma City, a team that loses Russell Westbrook, loses Paul George, full rebuild mode. Didn't matter. He got that team to be the 5th seed in the Western Conference and challenge the Houston Rockets, who had far more talent, to a 7-game series. A 7-game series. So I look at that and I say, this guy's a winner. The thing is, they just beat the Clippers and they just beat the Jazz. They blew out the Jazz and they beat the Clippers also, which that's important because it's just the road they're going to have to take for the playoffs, right? As of right now, they most likely will play Portland in the first round and Denver, the Lakers in the second round, right? And I'll talk about the Lakers later on in the segment. I've talked about LeBron earlier in the show, but Phoenix has a great opportunity to make some noise in the playoffs if they can really put it together. And the thing is, I look at Phoenix, right, guys, and they were great back in that 2010 period, right? They had guys like Steve Nash, Sean Marion, previous to that they had Shaq. D'Antoni's offense was obviously a really good offensive scheme. It really maximizes the capabilities of a point guard because what it does is it opens up the offense because they give the ball in the point guard's hands more, where the point guard gets a much higher usage rate, and they get to do more for the team to be successful. It's why you see Brooklyn's offense being so good, because Steve Nash and D'Antoni both understand offense very, very well. And the thing is, you look at the Suns this year, and when I look at them, the reason why I think they can totally be a contender is because compared to those Phoenix teams back when Steve Nash was there, they're way more balanced. And balance is key, right? In the NBA, you need to have balance, right? The Lakers were good enough offensively last year. Excellent defensive team. You look at the Golden State, right? Golden State had an unreal offense, but they were still a top 8 to 9 defensive team. And in some years, they were top 5. You look at even Toronto, right? Top 5 defensive team, good offense, right? You have to be balanced in order to win an NBA championship or be a contender, in my opinion, right? That's not necessarily true. You can be a contender and not be that balanced. But I think if you legitimately saying this team can get to the Western Conference Finals, you have to be a balanced team because you have to be able to get stops when the game slows down. You got to be able to stop half-court offense. There's stuff you have to be able to do in order to win. And I look at teams like the Lakers. Obviously, they've been struggling. But they have at least a balanced type of team in terms of when LeBron's healthy and fully integrated, this team can run good offense. I mean, again, but when they won the NBA championship, they had the second best offense in the league when he was playing. Right? It's just what LeBron does. The same thing Chris Paul does that too. Chris Paul knows how to orchestrate really good offense, get guys in their spots to be successful. Monty Williams obviously is a very good coach. He's been able to get in the playoffs before, and he's had experience with that. But the reason why I bring up balance is because Phoenix is the 6th best defense in the NBA as well. And why is that important? Because in the Western Conference, they have incredible players. Western Conference generally has more talent than the Eastern Conference, right? There might be some bigger name stars maybe in the Eastern Conference, like a Kevin Durant, Joel Embiid, Jason Tatum, James Harden, right? But in the Western Conference, you consistently have an all-star on every team. That's a playoff team. Right? Portland's got Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, both all-star level talented guys. Dallas has got Kristaps Porzingis and Luka Doncic. The Lakers got Anthony Davis, LeBron James, Andre Drummond. The Clippers have Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. The Nuggets have Nikola Jokic and when healthy, Jamal Murray. And then you also look at just like the top teams too. Phoenix has Devin Booker, Chris Paul. Utah's got Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, right? The Eastern Conference, you go down the list, right? Miami didn't have an all-star this year. They're a playoff team. Because, I mean, look, Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler are all-star level players, but I'm comparing the talent. That's why defense is so important. And that's why Phoenix has been really successful, because they have really good continuity in offense. They have scorers who can get buckets at any time, and Devin Booker. And Chris Paul is a guy down the stretch. He's always been in the regular season one of the top guys in clutch efficiency and clutch points the last 3 seasons. And the reason why is because he's a guy who, despite not winning an NBA championship or coming up as big as he needed to in those moments, he is a guy that definitely can get your team to that position because he has had clutch moments in his career. He's a winner, right? He's one of the best point guards to ever play basketball, and a championship definitely would get him in a better echelon of point guards if he was able to get that across. But the thing is, defense is important. This is where Chris Paul comes in, because Chris Paul himself is a good leader and a good defender. You have that guy come in, you have that guy run your offense and run your scheme, right? But defensively, you have a guy who's a leader who understands how to get a team to properly play defense and understand how to adjust schemes, get these young guys to be motivated to play defense. I mean, look at Mikal Bridges, right? Best season of his career. Mikal Bridges has always been a pretty good defender, but again, he's really taken a big step in that this year. And the reason why is because Chris Paul's leadership. Devin Booker's playing more consistent defense. DeAndre Ayton's playing more consistent defense, even though he's not a great defender. But you have guys like Jay Crowder, right, who can defend. Cameron Payne can defend. You can throw body after body at guys. And again, they don't really have a wing defender that if you put them against LeBron James, you're going to shut him down. And to be honest with you guys, there's not many guys that can shut down LeBron. I don't really think there's anyone in the league that can shut down LeBron. You can contain him. But the thing is, Phoenix has balance at least, though. And that's important. You have balance, and that helps you out, right? And the thing is, what this is great about, the fact that they're in the postseason and are going to be able to make a run, the reason why this is great for them is for a few reasons. One is that the fact is people thought they were going to be a 6th or 7th seed this year with Chris Paul. They've completely overexceeded expectations. And overexceeding expectations usually is obviously a good thing, but it's also something that can be a huge momentum boost going into the postseason, right? And I think that's important because you look at the Phoenix Suns, they overexceeded those expectations and they believe in themselves. And if you have a belief in your team, you have the right game plan, right execution, and you have the players that can at least make it happen, you have a chance, right? But I think it's also great for the fans who really had to struggle through 2011 through 2019, seeing their team not make the playoffs, be a lottery team a lot of those years. Let's be honest, most of those years. And now Phoenix is the number 1 seed at this moment in time. They're going to be in the playoffs, and they really are a team that can be very scary. But you also look at like 2020, right? They built off the momentum of their 2020 bubble success, right? They were 8-0 in the bubble. Only team that in that 8-game stretch went 8-0. And the thing is, when you make key additions to that team, you bring in guys like Chris Paul, who's a known winner and a known great leader, one of the best point guards in the game, an all-star. You bring him in. You bring Jay Crowder in, who's a great 3-and-D guy. And then Monty Williams is able to continue to build on the scheme that he got to be successful down the bubble. That's why Phoenix has been so super successful. And the thing is, you look at, there are concerns that people have with the Phoenix Suns, obviously, right? Oh, well, they don't have a lot of playoff experience. Oh, they have guys who've never played in the playoffs before who are their top guys. Well, Chris Paul is one of their top guys. He's playing the playoffs. Jay Crowder is one of their top guys. He's playing the playoffs. Dario Saric has been a big bench piece for them. He's playing the playoffs. Oh, right. And they also have a head coach who's been in the playoff series before, too. So the lack of experience, and I'm going to compare this to something else, too, for you guys. Right? LeBron James in 2007 took a team that had little to none playoff experience, got them to the NBA Finals. In 2020, a lot of the guys in the Lakers team had not been in big playoff moments before. They won the NBA championship. If you have the right culture, you have the right stars, you have the right leaders on your team, you can still be successful in the playoffs. I think that argument, again, we'll see how legit Phoenix is when they get to the postseason, but I think they're very legit because they keep proving everyone wrong. They keep on racking up big win after big win, right? They beat the Clippers, they beat the Jazz, they beat the Lakers, they beat the Sixers twice. And that's important, right? Because Chris Paul at least knows what the playoffs is about, right? Yes, I understand he has not gotten to the NBA Finals. I understand that he fell short in the Western Conference Finals, and he's fallen short many other times in the playoffs. But he understands what the playoffs is about, and so does Monty Williams, so does Jay Crowder. And Devin Booker's a guy, at least in the bubble, in meaningful 8-0 basketball, in terms of that record, right? That was kind of meaningful basketball. They almost made the play-in game because of his great play. And the reason why that's important is because if Devin Booker continues to play big in big games, they can be in any playoff series because their defense is good enough. They have at least good role players. And then again, Devin Booker and Chris Paul are star players that can score. And Chris Paul's not like an elite level scorer like he used to be, but Chris Paul still can score big time in the clutch because he's a great mid-range shooter and a guy who just can create really well in the pick and roll for others. And again, this is also the fact, like the reason why I'm comparing that team to LeBron is because LeBron didn't have a ton of playoff experience going into that 2007 run, but he was able to get that team to the NBA Finals with the guys who had little playoff experience and weren't that talented. 2020, right? A lot of those guys in the Lakers who were role players didn't have the playoff experience, but were able to get the job done. Anthony Davis was a guy who never, ever got to the Western Conference Finals. Never did. He never got out of the second round. And as a result of that, LeBron still was able to uplift Anthony Davis' game to the point where Anthony Davis was a big catalyst in that championship run for the Lakers. So, like I said, the concerns have some validity, right? Obviously, Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton not playing in the postseason. The playoffs are a different animal. I get that. That's fair. It's a fair argument. I understand what people are saying when it comes to that. But ultimately, Devin Booker has proven to be big time, right? His play in the bubble, his play during the season against good teams. I mean, look at his last couple games, right? We can look at just the last couple games, and we can look at guys like Devin Booker, who have really taken the next step, I think. You look at Devin Booker, right? This year he's averaging 25.5 points a game. And I'm going to look at his last 3 games for you guys, right? Against the Knicks, he played 41 minutes, and the Knicks are one of the top defensive teams in the league. He had 33 points on 14 of 26 from the floor, and they won that game. Against the Clippers, he had 21. They won that game. Against Utah, he had 31. And they're all on efficient shooting percentages. 14 out of 26, 9 out of 19, which is just below 50%, which is still very good. And 13 out of 19 versus the Jazz. In only 29 minutes also, mind you, because they blew out the Jazz. So people saying, oh, he can't play in big-time moments, if there's people who are making that argument, that doesn't have a lot of validity. I understand the playoffs are a different animal. I understand the playoffs are a different kind of, experience for younger players to hone themselves and get themselves to that next level. But let's look at Donovan Mitchell, for example, right? He's a guy who had no playoff experience as a rookie, and he beat a team in OKC that had Paul George, Russell Westbrook, and Carmelo Anthony with Steven Adams and that crew, and beat him in 6 games. And he was the reason they won. So I'm not as worried about Devin Booker not being able to play well in the postseason. Look, there's a great chance he doesn't play well in the postseason, right? Obviously. But this is great for this franchise. This is great for this city. This is great for building a culture of winning back in Phoenix. And it's good to see a new face back in the playoff picture again, because we saw teams like the Rockets consistently there, right? The Warriors consistently there. Right now, the Warriors are in the play-in game at the 10th spot, but the Rockets are one of the worst teams in basketball. And it's good for the NBA, in my opinion, because you have a new team with new stars. Well, not saying new stars, but new stars in the postseason, I think is what I was looking for there. And you have that opportunity now to have those guys go in. Now, in terms of where I think Phoenix is going to go, I think Phoenix is definitely going to win the first round. I think Phoenix will. Depends who they play. If the Lakers are the 6th spot and they play Denver in the first round and Phoenix stays the 1, I think Phoenix legitimately could beat the Clippers. Do I think they logistically could because of the star talent? Most people probably would not say that, but I think the way they've been playing recently, the fact that they were really balanced at both ends of the court, the fact that Devin Booker has given the Clippers real trouble in the past, the fact that Chris Paul will probably want to beat the Clippers as bad as anyone in the gym, and the fact is they have great role players, right? And Kawhi Leonard just came back, but again, the Clippers, the one thing, I do think the Clippers are incredibly good if Paul George has been playing at the level he's been playing. But I think the recent game against Denver just showed everyone exactly what is wrong with the Clippers, that they struggle in clutch moments at times, right? Their efficiency numbers are in the bottom end of the league in those categories, offensively and defensively. So the thing is, that would be a better matchup for them, honestly, than playing the Lakers in the second round. And the reason why I'm saying that, and this is also, like I said, a big if if the Lakers' chemistry is on point, which I think LeBron will get himself back into form. But if they were playing Dallas or the Clippers in the second round, that would be able to put them in a good opportunity. I think the Suns are definitely a second round type of team, or even a Western Conference Finals kind of team. I think they're definitely a team that should be considered in that contender role. Right? Whether or not they live up to those expectations, we'll see. But I think they're a team that has that legitimate shot. And I think that's something that people need to start taking a little bit more seriously here. And when they put this team together, they put this team together to win a championship now. Because they said, okay, we have all these youth and young pieces. We don't want these guys leaving to other teams. We want these guys to stay in Phoenix and make Phoenix good, right? Because Phoenix was great under the D'Antoni coaching style, and I get that. But the thing is, what I'm going to say here is that this Phoenix team is different than that team, and I think this Phoenix team has a very good chance to actually make a real run in the playoffs because they've shown a level of consistency in the last couple weeks, which I kind of criticized them a little bit for in my power rankings I did a few weeks back. And they've definitely kind of made me change my tune on them as a team. I've always liked the way they played, and I've always liked the fact that they're a great story. But I think now they actually have the legitimate pieces and the legitimate balance and the legitimate wins and consistency for me to look at this team and say, okay, this team can make a real run. In the Western Conference, obviously, I think that the Western Conference playoffs will be incredibly, incredibly entertaining. And that's how I think it's going to go. I think Phoenix is a great chance to go to the Western Conference Finals. I think, hypothetically, most likely, I think they're going to be a second-round team for sure, but they definitely have a chance to make the Western Conference Finals. That's how I feel about the Phoenix Suns at this moment in time. And that's why it's so significant for their city that they got this playoff berth and are able to make a chance of being that great franchise again. We're going to take a quick commercial break here, but on my next segment, we're going to talk about which lower seed in the Eastern Conference and Western Conference presents the scariest sort of vision or scariest sort of matchup for the teams in the higher end seeding of these prospective conferences. All that coming back up when we come back from the commercial break.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Michael Schroeder. And my last segment, I talked about the Phoenix Suns, them getting their first playoff berth since 2010. Right now, they're the number one seed in the Western Conference. And talked about how this team can legitimately be a contender. I like talking about teams that are under the radar stories, and that's one team that definitely has shocked a lot of people based on where they have been seeded this season. But now this segment, on my last segment, we're going to talk about what teams in the Eastern and Western Conference can pose very difficult challenges as a lower seed, right? So I'm going to talk about two teams in the Western Conference and two teams from the Eastern Conference that could definitely cause some challenges, right? And the first team I want to start with in the Western Conference is the Dallas Mavericks. The Dallas Mavericks right now are the fifth seed in the Western Conference, right? And the reason why I think they're very dangerous is because Kristaps Porzingis and Luka Doncic are a good duo, right? When Porzingis and Luka are healthy, I think their spacing is very hard to guard. I think the fact that Porzingis can do a lot from a center position, from a versatility standpoint, is very difficult to guard. I think the fact is you also have a guy in Luka who's a top 8 player in the league and the best young player in basketball, in my opinion, and I think going to be the best player in the NBA within a couple years. A guy that just orchestrates everything on offense for them. And you have those two guys. And again, in playoff series, those guys have shown to perform well as a duo. And that's really helped them progress into a better team, basically. They also have multiple shooters that can space the court. Maxi Kleber is one of the best percentage-wise catch-and-shoot guys in the league. Tim Hardaway Jr. can really shoot the ball, even though he has his moments where he's very inconsistent. He can shoot the ball at a high level. You got guys like Jalen Brunson who can shoot the ball, Josh Richardson, J.J. Redick now. We can even just go down the line with other guys too, obviously, like Wesley Iwundu and guys like that. But again, and I forgot also Dorian Finney-Smith can really shoot the ball as well. So Dallas has a lot of shooting they can go to if they need to get a bucket, and they allow a lot of space to be created for Luka to do his magic in a sense, right? Luka magic. But that's what makes Luka so effective is the fact that they have a lot of spacing and he knows where guys are going to be and what they need to do to be successful. So that's the second point there is that they have a lot of pieces that can really make things open up for guys like Porzingis and Luka. The third reason why they're dangerous is because they have Rick Carlisle, who's an offensive genius, right? They were first in offensive efficiency last year. They're 8th this year after starting out real slow. And it's because he understands mismatches. He understands where Porzingis can take advantage of his athleticism and his shooting. He understands where Luka can take advantage of his mismatches and get into the paint and make plays happen for others. He knows how to maximize the potential of the team. And the thing is, he's also won a championship. He's had runs in the playoffs before, so he knows how to get to that next level. And with that being said, what he's been able to do is really get these guys to continually find mismatches and exploit these mismatches. And he's had to change his scheme, right? With Dallas, when they won the championship in 2011, he had to get all these mismatches for Dirk Nowitzki. And they really paid off. He got Dirk always in great positions to get a bucket at any sort of time. And it's because he understands offenses and he understands how they can evolve and how the game needs to be changed. And he's really quick to pick up on that. And the fact is he understands, okay, here's the mismatches I got to take for these guys to be successful, right? So the fact that he's won a championship, the fact that he's an offensive genius, the fact that he's been successful as a head coach for a long time, and the fact that he understands the playoffs and the importance of them. And also, look, I think the fact is if they play the Clippers or the Nuggets in the first round, those aren't unfavorable matchups for the Mavericks because the Mavericks, Luka's had success against the Clippers, and Luka's also had a high level of success against the Nuggets as well. So I look at all of that, and that's important there. Like I mentioned before, they're also 8th in offensive efficiency, and they were one of the bottom end teams to start the year in offensive efficiency when they were struggling. And it's because Luka started to play a lot better. The guys have started to hit more threes. The spacing's opened up. And the fact is, you have guys like Dwight Powell who can really roll into the basket at a high level. And then you also got guys like Porzingis who can pick and pop and make things difficult for your defense. So with all of that, you have that kind of ability to really expand and make your game better as a result. So, and also the fact that your offense is going to get better based on the fact that if you have a lot of spacing, guys know what they're supposed to do. So that's another reason why I think they can be really dangerous. I think another reason, though, is Luka Doncic himself. He's improved in different categories. He's improved as a three-point shooter. He's about 36% from the three-point range this year, and he's shot over 38% basically in the second half of the season. And the reason why that's important is because guys are going to force him to his left more, right? He likes to go right a lot and drive. So the thing is, going left, he's going to be able to get to that step back. And the fact that he can get his spacing on point with that move and then also be able to make plays from that is going to help them as they progress. But also the big thing, too, is that since he's shooting the three ball well, you got to play him more respectfully, on that three-point shot, and that opens up everything for his game. And he's already an incredible player, but the fact that he's now more consistent from three-point range and he's taking a lot of tough threes and making them, it's very difficult to guard that. And that's where things get really difficult for your defense. I mean, look, he's averaging 28.6 points a game, 7.8 rebounds, and 8.7 assists. Basically, he's a triple-double machine if you need him to be. He's a guy that can take over games. He can get the guys around him better. He's improved a little bit defensively. And the fact is, too, is like I said, he's dominated the Clippers and the Nuggets in big moments either in the regular season or in the playoffs. So this guy can really do a lot for your team. And the fact that he's improved makes it even more scary for Dallas as they go into this playoff series. I think also, look, they're 18th in defensive efficiency. They're better than last season when they were 21st. 18th is still not very good, but they've shown the ability to play decent defense, right? Against the Warriors, when they blew them out, they played good defense. When they played other teams like the Clippers early in the season, they were able to clamp down defensively, right? Even when they beat the Clippers recently, they were able to clamp down defensively. And it's because Luka is really good at on offensive stuff, but if they can defend at a high level or defend better and not let guys get easy paths to the basket, and Porzingis can be a legitimate shot blocker like he's starting to do better at this season, it's going to make Dallas a harder out, because if Dallas can defend, they're going to be really hard to stop anyway. So like if they can defend, they're going to be able to win a lot of these games in the postseason. And the reason I think they can be dangerous is because of potential matchups, right? I've mentioned it already a few times. The fact is, if they play the Clippers right now, which what they're slated to play is the Los Angeles Clippers, I actually like that matchup for them because they've had experience going against that team before. And the thing is, they've had some success against them this season as well. And Luka specifically has had a lot of success against them in the playoffs and the regular season. And the reason why that's important is because you want to have confidence against the team you're going against, right? And I think that Porzingis had success against the Clippers because the Clippers don't really have a matchup for him, and Luka's had a lot of success because I think he's one of the toughest guards in basketball. And I mean, I don't mean guards just like in position. He is one of those, but I'm saying toughest guy to defend in basketball because he has so many different moves and he plays at his own pace. And the Clippers struggle against him. It's just how it is. They have had struggled against him for a good while, and that's how it is. And the thing is, when the Mavs played the Warriors, they can explode at any time. They went on a 28-0 run in that recent game. They have the ability to really explode on the offensive end, and that's tough. If you go in the playoff series and the game slows down, and the thing is, they can run efficient half-court offense, which is a lot of things that these higher-level, fast-break, high-pace type of teams don't really do at a high level. And the thing is, that makes them a very dangerous out, because if they can hit threes, they can go on runs. It's going to be hard to negate that, even for how good your defense is, because Luka can really get going. And then if the guys are hitting threes because you're really paying your defensive attention to Luka, it's going to be hard to win those games. So that's where I go from there. Now, they will play. So I like that's just an important point there. And they've also been more consistent recently, right? They've won a bunch of games recently. They're 8-4 in their last 12 games, and I like them more than a team like the Blazers, who's had some real good moments recently in their last couple of games, but had a stretch where they lost like 6 in a row. And I look at consistency going into the postseason as a big determining factor into whether a team's dangerous or not. And I look at that, and I think that this team could be really, really dangerous based on that. In the Western Conference, I also look at the Lakers, too, because the Lakers have LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Andre Drummond, the number one defense in the NBA, and a team that just won the NBA championship. Right now, the Lakers are at the 6th spot, right? And people are like, oh my God, like, are they going to be able to get together? And look, they need to fix up their chemistry flaws for sure. But if they're on point, that's a team no one wants to see in the first round. No one wants to see them as a first-round opponent because they have LeBron James, the best player in the game. Anthony Davis is a top 5 to 8 player in the game. And then you also have Andre Drummond, who's a guy he's a great rebounder, decent defender, and an all-star level kind of player, right? When he is really engaged in doing what he's supposed to be doing. Then Dennis Schroeder is a good player, obviously, and Montrezl Harrell can bring great scoring off the bench, and Taylor Horton-Tucker has really emerged as a good bench piece. No one wants to see the Lakers in the first round. It's just how it is. No one wants to see them, and I think that's kind of the whole deal there. And I look at the Lakers and I say, okay, if you have to play this team in the first round, you're going to be in real trouble if they're on their game and their chemistry has been built. Whether that's the Clippers, whether that's the Nuggets, if they're really in good position, and if the Nuggets have to play them in the first round, which is right now what it's slated to be, if the Lakers are fully healthy and fully integrated, it's going to be very hard to beat that team in a 7-game series because I think they're the most imposing and championship experience and driven team in the Western Conference. So with that being said, right, the Mavericks are very dangerous, but the Lakers are more and more dangerous because of LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And if those guys get their win back and their chemistry back, it's going to be lights out for a lot of teams that are going to play them in the Western Conference. And that's where I go there, right? So for the Western Conference, I have the Dallas Mavericks and the Los Angeles Lakers. as the teams that are going to be the most dangerous as lower seeds, because the Mavericks have a lot of offensive talent, and Luka Doncic is unbelievable, and the matchups they could potentially see could be really difficult. But I look at the Lakers and think they're the most dangerous lower seed, obviously, because they have LeBron James, they have Anthony Davis, they have great championship pieces, a championship-level head coach, a great defense. And the thing is, when you have LeBron and Anthony Davis on any team, it's going to be really hard to beat those guys in a 7-game series if they are fully in shape and fully have their chemistry right. Those are two big ifs, but I'm saying if those guys are fully back ready to go, it's going to be very, very difficult to beat those guys. Now we're going to shift over to the Eastern Conference. What teams I think are sleepers there? Okay, let's talk about the first one I think is the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat, I think, are going to be a team that can really cause some real trouble for some top seeds. And the reason why I say that is because they have championship experience, right? Eric Spoelstra's been to 5 NBA Finals, and they were just in the NBA Finals last year. Look, people can attribute that to being a fluke bubble season. That's fine. But Miami still got there, and they still have the experience. Jimmy Butler's a big-time player. So is Bam Adebayo. They have great role players. Victor Oladipo is going to be coming back. And I look at this team, and they're the 7th seed in the East right now. Right, they're 7th seed in the East, which is not bad, right? They're in the play-in game right now, which is not ideally where anyone wants to be. But I look at their team, and if they hold that 7th spot, right, which is totally possible, right? Right now they have the same record as Boston, and they play them soon, right? If they ever get the 6th spot or the 7th spot, right, playing the Sixers or the Nets or the Bucks, they could give any of those teams a series because they have a great continuity and chemistry about them. They understand how to play at a high level. They also understand that they have a strategy to defend. With Giannis, for example, they have a wall. They have had success against Embiid in the past defensively, even though I think he would be a hard matchup for them. And they've beaten Brooklyn before, twice, and Bam Adebayo has shown real level of success, and they've done this without Jimmy Butler a lot of times too. So the fact that they're so good defensively, too, they're top 5 defensively, is going to make them a real tough out as well. Because I look at Miami, and I think a few things, right? I think of Eric Spoelstra, championship-level head coach. I think of Jimmy Butler, a guy who's played in the finals and did really well, a guy who's been in multiple playoff series and had major success. Then I look at the fact that they have an ability to adjust on the fly very well. The fact that they can adjust their strategy accordingly and do a good job there. I think the fact is they're 5-2 in their last 7 games. Sorry, 6-2 in their last 8 games, and now they're looking more like a consistent team. And the reason why that's important is because you have to be consistent in order to do well in the playoffs. And for them, I see a high level of consistency, right? They had a strategy last year when they beat Giannis in 5 games where they just walled them off, and they did a really good job there. They can adjust their strategy very well to beat a team like Brooklyn, go smaller. Because the thing with them is they can switch everything defensively, right? Bam Adebayo can switch and do a really good job in that regard. You also have the fact that Giannis is not a guy that, you can build a wall against him, but against Brooklyn, right, you can switch everything and have guys who at least can make things difficult on those guards. And even to Kevin Durant, for example, right? The thing is, too, is that Eric Spoelstra has 600 wins in his career. And the reason why he's done that is because he's had guys be able to buy in and make things difficult for other teams they play against, because he's a guy who knows how to adjust his scheme. He knows how to get matchups in favor of what they're looking to do. They run a great dribble handoff offense to get their shooters open. Duncan Robinson, I think, is the fastest guy to 273, something like that, or like 500 threes or something like that, or some crazy award he got the other night. And so look, you have the shooters around those, Bam Adebayo, Victor Oladipo, and Jimmy Butler, right? And the fact is, Oladipo is the reason why I think they could be really dangerous, because Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo are already guys who have proven to do well in the postseason, right? Jimmy Butler against Indiana, for example, and even against their series against the Bucks, right? He's had big games. And then you look at the Boston series where Bam Adebayo just destroyed Boston. You have to look at Miami and think they're still a real scary team. And they're really the only team. I mean, look, Boston has, I'll talk about Boston in a minute, but Miami, the last one I'm going to make is that experience, toughness, and shooters can make them really dangerous, right? They have the experience of being in the postseason with this group, getting far in the postseason, having the confidence around this team. They have the experience also of being doubted. No one thought they were going to get to this level. And the thing is that they have that confidence around their team. They think that they can win an NBA championship again, and they know that if they get rolling at the right time, they can be really dangerous because they've had that already happen before. And that's important for people to understand, is that they've already had this experience of getting on these moments. And so as a result of that, they have the toughness to get to that level. They have shooters all around them that are really important for just making sure you have good spacing on offense. And that's where I go from there, right? I look at this team. Now, to wrap up, I'm going to look at the Boston Celtics as well, right? Because I've been, down the Boston Celtics because I really think they have real issues in terms of their defense. Like, again, but they've had some moments where I look at them and they say, okay, this team could be, dangerous. Like Milwaukee would not be a bad matchup for them in round one. And the fact that Jason Tatum had 60 points the other night and looks like more comfortable and more like himself, it's going to come down to, though, for Boston. And I think Boston can be scary because they have the talent to be very scary. But the thing with them is they got to be able to defend at a high level, which has been questionable for them all year. They got to be able to have more consistent play from guys like Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier, which they haven't had a lot this season. And Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have to be on their best game and healthy for this team to be successful. And that's where that's the important point to take away here, guys, is that I look at Miami as more dangerous because Miami has had better moments recently in the playoffs. They look, in terms defensively, way more consistent. And I think in the Eastern Conference, you got to be able to defend at a high level. And I don't think Boston really has that right now. And I think that from an offensive talent standpoint, they can definitely make noise. But I think they don't defend well enough. And that's why people are probably saying, oh, why aren't you including Boston? The reason I put Miami is because Miami has a team that just came off the NBA Finals, a team that's top 5 defensively, a team that has a head coach that has been to NBA Finals. Brad Stevens has not been to an NBA Finals, right? I would take Eric Spoelstra out coached Brad Stevens last year in that Eastern Conference Finals anyway. So I look at Boston, I say, okay, Boston's got the talent to be interesting, but they haven't shown the level of consistency on both ends of the floor to make me confident that this team can really turn it around and win a playoff series that they have to win, right? That's where I kind of look at this whole argument. And that's why I look at Boston, I say, okay, this team's got the talent and the capabilities to be good, but we'll see what happens, right? And, it's interesting, but we'll see how these sleepers actually do, right? So to recap it for you guys, in the Western Conference, I have the Dallas Mavericks because of the really talented young superstar. I have the Lakers, obviously, because of LeBron and Anthony Davis and the fact that they won a championship last year and would be about the scariest matchup out of any lower seed, I think, that I've mentioned. And then I also have the Miami Heat because the Miami Heat have championship level experience. They've been playing way more consistent basketball. And the fact is, I look at their defense and the way that Eric Spoelstra has been able to adjust his schemes in the playoffs based on the fact that he's been to 5 NBA Finals. And I see this team as a team that can really contend to beat off one of those top seeds. Again, I would probably pick like the Bucks over them, and I'd probably pick the Sixers and Nets over them, but it's not a done deal, right? I think that would be a tough series. I think Miami could win those series because if Miami gets a 6th spot, I think they have a better chance of beating Milwaukee than Boston does because they defend well enough, and they've had great success while doing it. And that's important, right? You got to be able to defend at a high level, and they have shown that they can be able to do that. So I look at those teams, right? The Dallas Mavericks, the Lakers from the Western Conference, and Miami from the Eastern Conference to say these teams can be real sleepers as we continue to move forward in the playoff push. And these teams can really cause major headaches for these teams that they're going to be going against. So that's where I go with that. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast today. This is a GSMC basketball podcast brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Michael Schroeder. Please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, GSMC Basketball. And also subscribe to us on any sort of podcast platform you listen to. We really would appreciate that. And also, if you have any thoughts on today's episode, any comments you want to talk about, put them in the comments below. Give us a good review. We really would appreciate that. And look to engage with the fans too. So thank you so much, and have a good rest of your day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.